So, have you ever actually stopped to wonder what your smartphone flashlight, the high-speed fiber optic internet piping into your living room, and that scanner at the grocery checkout all have in common? I mean, on the surface, they look like completely different technologies, right? But if we zoom in, way down to the atomic level, they are literally manipulating the exact same physical rules. In this explainer, we're diving into a beautiful, frankly elegant scientific narrative that I like to call the energy loop. We're going to see how mastering the totally invisible behavior of electrons has, quite literally, illuminated our modern world.
Here's our roadmap for understanding this energy loop. First up, we've got the semiconductor foundation. Then, part 2, LEDs, where we let there be light. Part 3 is lasers, where we amplify that light. And finally, part 4, photodetectors, where we catch the light. It's a seriously satisfying loop. We go from electricity to light, and then right back from light into electricity. Let's get into it.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the Semiconductor Foundation. Okay, so to understand how we actually create and capture light, we really have to understand the physical stage where all the action happens. And the single most important concept here is something called the band gap. Now, what is that? Well, think of the band gap as a literal physical chasm that an electron has to jump across. It's an area of strictly disallowed energies. So below this gap, electrons are just stuck at home, bound really tightly to their atom. But above the gap, that's where they are free to move and actually conduct electricity. And here's the crucial thing. The amount of energy required to force an electron to make that jump is directly tied to the material's structural bond strength. So really tough, high bond strength materials, like diamond or silicon carbide, they have massive band gaps. Meanwhile, lower bond strength materials, like regular silicon, have much smaller ones.
So let's picture what this looks like in a totally calm state. You've got these valence electrons just sitting quietly in their outer orbits. Without any extra energy being applied from the outside, these electrons are perfectly content to just stay right where they are, anchored to the atomic core. At this point, the material is acting kind of like an insulator. It's just sitting there waiting for a spark.
But here's where the physics gets incredibly cool. If we supply just enough energy, and that could be from heat, from light, or an electrical voltage, we can liberate that electron. Boom, it jumps the band gap. It becomes a free-moving conducting electron. But notice what happens when it leaves. It leaves behind an empty space. We call that empty space a positive hole. This idea, the creation of an electron-hole pair, this is absolutely the core rule of our entire energy loop. If you can wrap your head around the fact that electrons can jump up, leave a hole, and then eventually fall back down into that hole, well, you basically understand the foundation of all modern optoelectronics.
Which brings us perfectly to Section 2, LEDs. Let there be light.
All right, so now we're actively pushing electricity onto our atomic stage to create light. And you already know where LEDs are, right? They're literally everywhere. They're the ultimate everyday lighting solution. We're talking street lamps, kitchen fixtures, commercial lighting, down to the tiny little blinking light on your Bluetooth headphones or your smartphone flashlight. But why did they take over the world? Mostly because they are super budget-friendly, incredibly rugged, and they last practically forever. Structurally, an LED is designed with a relatively large active region, what engineers call the intrinsic region. Because this photon-producing reaction is spread over a wider surface area, the LED can dissipate heat incredibly well. And that is exactly what makes them so insanely energy efficient.
But how do they actually glow? What's the magic trick? The process is called electroluminescence. Remember those electrons we forced to jump across the band gap earlier? Well, what goes up must eventually come down. As we drive voltage through the diode, those high-energy electrons inevitably fall back down across the chasm to recombine with the empty holes they left behind. And when they drop back down to that lower, more relaxed energy state, they have to release that extra energy somehow. So they spit it out in the form of a photon, a tiny little packet of light. Now, in a standard LED, this happens completely spontaneously. The light that shoots out is incoherent and multidirectional. It just scatters out in every direction to light up the room.
Now, what if we want to organize that light? That brings us to Section 3, lasers, amplifying the light. Okay, if we want to take that scattered, messy LED light and basically weaponize it into a perfectly focused beam, we have to change the structure. An LED and a laser diode are actually super similar. They both use a basic pin diode structure, but there's a fundamental difference. An LED gives us that scattered, multi-directional light because, like we said, it has a larger intrinsic region. A laser diode, on the other hand, is built to generate coherent, unidirectional light. How? By physically squeezing that electrical current into a much smaller intrinsic region. By cramming all that current into a tiny microscopic space, the laser diode creates a state called population inversion. Basically, it creates this massively dense, chaotic cluster of excited electrons that are all just desperately waiting to fall back down. And here is where the true genius of the laser diode comes in, the optical cavity. Instead of just letting the photons escape immediately, like an LED does, a laser diode actually traps them. The edges of that tiny active region are smoothed out into mirror-like surfaces. So when a photon is created, it bounces off the mirror and is shoved right back into that super dense crowd of excited electrons. And as it zips past them, it triggers something called stimulated emission. It basically forces another electron to drop its energy and release a photon that is an exact, perfectly identical clone. Same phase, same polarization, same wavelength. These clones bounce back and forth, reduplicating millions of times in this microscopic hall of mirrors, until the beam is so intense, so powerful, that it bursts right through the partially reflective output mirror.
This level of incredible precision completely unlocks a whole new world of applications, because laser light is coherent, and because these laser diodes can be turned on and off incredibly fast, literally faster than a nanosecond. They've become the absolute backbone of global data transmission. We use them to pulse data through fiber optic cables that span the bottom of the world's oceans. We use them for precision scanning at the grocery store, for reading optical discs like Blu-rays, for high-res printing, and even for laser absorption spectroscopy to analyze gases in scientific labs. If an LED is a broad brush, the laser diode is an absolute precision scalpel.
All right, moving to the final piece of the puzzle. Section 4, Photodetectors, catching the light.
So far, we've gone from electricity to light. Now we completely reverse the process. We are going to catch the light and turn it back into electricity. This is known as the photoconductive effect. It's a simple three-step process. Step 1. Incident light, meaning incoming photons, bombards our semiconductor material. Step 2. The energy from those photons slams into the bound valence electrons and physically knocks them loose, generating those electron hole pairs across the band gap that we talked about earlier. Step 3. Because we suddenly have all these newly freed electrons zipping around, the electrical conductivity of the entire material changes, and we can measure that change as a distinct electrical signal. Just like that, we have translated a beam of light into pure digital data. And because light exists in so many different forms, engineers have developed an entire family of photodetectors to catch it. For just everyday general light sensing, we use standard photodiodes. But what if the light signal is incredibly faint? Like, say, a degraded pulse that just traveled through 100 miles of fiber optic cable. For that, we use avalanche photodiodes. They have a built-in internal electric field that creates a literal avalanche of electrons to amplify that tiny signal. Then you've got CCD and CMOS sensors. You probably recognize those acronyms because they are massive arrays of tiny light-sensitive pixels, which is the exact technology sitting inside your smartphone camera right now, turning the visual universe into your selfies. And finally, for the most extreme scientific stuff, like detecting a single solitary photon in astronomy or particle physics, we rely on highly sensitive photomultiplier tubes.
So here is the grand unification of the entire energy loop. Whether we are lighting up a dark street with an LED, shooting Netflix data across the Atlantic Ocean with a laser diode, or snapping a high-res photo with the CMOS sensor, they are all related. They're basically cousins. They all share the exact same structural heart, the semiconductor pin diode. It's just a positive region, a negative region, and an intrinsic active zone right in the middle. We are literally just running the exact same atomic machinery, just in different directions and with slightly different geometries.
There's a great quote from a Georgia Tech engineering lecture we referenced for this explainer. It says, "Control of conductivity is the key to modern electronic devices." And it's so true. Mastering that tiny, invisible, disallowed gap of energy, figuring out exactly how to push electrons across it to make light, and then how to use light to knock electrons back across it to make data, has completely, utterly revolutionized human society. So I want to leave you with this final thought. Everything we've unpacked today, this entire optoelectronic revolution, was largely built on foundational materials like silicon and some really basic compound semiconductors. If mastering just those initial materials gave us the entire modern world as we know it, instant global communication, ubiquitous computing, digital vision everywhere, what in the world are we going to invent next when we fully master the engineering of brand new, hyper-complex compound materials in the decades to come? The physics happening completely invisibly inside your pocket right now is really just the beginning of the energy loop. Keep learning, keep questioning, and thank you so much for exploring with us.